Sure.
Thanks, family, for joining us for another episode of Family Business, Our Health, Our Wealth, Our Business. Today, I'm joined with a dope sister from the community. We originally met in a stage play, correct?
Yes,
you was on a stage play right here in Atlanta from a mutual friend, Camila Montgomery. Shout out to me, Camila.
Shout out.
We were in a play, but
Playwright.
yeah, definitely. And it's just one of the things that we do to be involved in the community. But I do want to, thank you for coming through. We are speaking with Tra-Saundria, you know what I'm saying? And we are going to talk a little bit about your experiences, the black community, obviously. You have an interesting background. And so I definitely wanted to talk to you about kind of where you see the black community is, where we're going, some of the things that we need to implement within our community, and just like kind of like a state of the community address, you know what I mean? But without further ado, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and let family business begin.
Show enough. All family business. Hello, family. We are all family. As for us, gratitude for us being here, being able to express, us all being able to express positively doing things that benefit us, and not only us, everything around us, for growth, for love, for learning and applying. So in terms of that, when it comes to like the black community, that's what it is. Everything that is about us, whether it be our health, our drive, our mission, our goals, we have to dig deep within ourselves, see where our shortcomings are in all aspects, jobs, relationships, with self, with God, and just bring everything back into the 360 and make sure it's moving in harmony.
No doubt.
If anything is out of the ordinary and being in harmony with you doing and us doing what we need to do, then it needs to be done away with. So
well, I appreciate that. No, the energy is real, and I can feel it right now.
So many things I want to say. I
don't know how it goes. I know how I get, because especially on this podcast, there is a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said. One of the things about family business aspect, the reason why I did it, because I wanted to speak directly to our community, create a voice for our community, a platform for our community. I'm in total agreement in that, we can all live in harmony together. This is not to put down any community, any other community, but I do feel like, especially throughout history, there's a lack of representation. There has been a lack of representation, or at least a lack of proper representation, adequate representation for who we are and what we bring to the global platform. Immediately when you started speaking, I just felt the idea of evolution, evolving our thought process, evolving from our mindset, evolving who we see ourselves are in this world. You know what I mean? There's an understanding that I have that there's a world that there's a world that we live in, and then there's a world within ourselves. The world within ourselves is a connection, is a relationship that we have to build between us and the Most High. And so within that concept of evolution, that is where we have to strengthen our ties with the Most High and within ourselves. We have to strengthen those ties that give us an identity outside of the earthly, worldly identity that's been given to us. And we talked a little bit off air about kind of your background and how you got to this understanding. If you could, let the audience know a little bit about your background and where your mindset has come from and where has it grown.
Sure enough. So, start with, my roots are out of Lower Alabama. So at heart, I'm a country girl. You know, I'm raised in seeing farms and greenery and lushness and fruit trees and, you know, farmers on the side of the road selling watermelon and mangoes and apples and all that, because they just brought it from 2 miles, you know, down the road. So it's like seeing that and seeing the simple life, and also being able to have, with my father now being retired military, I was able, like you had mentioned, see the world inside myself and seeing myself in the world, but still not being disconnected.
Right.
That's what it is. Everything out here that we experience with our senses that we can tap into. We are taking in information and giving off information. We are supposed to work in harmony with nature, and that goes with our mindset and how that shows itself. Maybe a connect or disconnect in our community is how we treat each other in our, you know, in our everyday. Getting more specifically into the topics on us, you mentioned a misrepresentation of us throughout history. So with us not being in harmony, the unit of us, the value of us, and the respect of us to gain that representation is off. It's like it's at a disconnect. And that's how we see, you know, we've been seeing it, you know, in our families, our family structures, whether it be fathers not in the homes, mothers not in the homes, you know, or even if they are in the homes, the focus, you know, is on things that are not really developing themselves, constantly developing themselves, and the children as well. And that comes into the healthy and toxic relationships, you know, like with jobs, what you're supposed to be doing, what your mind is supposed to be on, what your heart is supposed to be on, and essentially working as an extension of the Most High.
No doubt.
So
you mentioned, and I see, and this is going to be interesting because I see the potential for this episode to go a lot deeper, you know, than just you know, the culture. You know what I mean? We can go a lot deeper than culture with this episode, because when you start talking about living in harmony with nature, living in harmony with spirit, these are things that a lot of people don't quite understand, and so they don't give it its reverence. You know what I mean? They don't use it or understand it in their everyday lives. But when you talk about spirit, living in harmony, there is an aspect of divine order. You know what I mean? And there's something but to divine order that comes from who we are. You know, we've had people on the episode, on the show, and we talked about how we are the original people. We represent something, and I've always said that we are a spiritual people first and foremost.
yes.
But we're living in such a material world right now.
Yes.
And so there's an imbalance of, or not, is a displacement, I'll say, that we are a spiritual people living in a material world, and it causes us to live out of sync and out of balance and out of harmony with the natural world, you know. And so what type of things have you seen abroad and here that you would say that represents the harmony or doesn't represent the harmony that we're supposed to be living in?
So with being outside of the U.S. and being in the country here, and also now being able to travel throughout the U.S. more, since I drive trucks or whatever, it's how people treat me here and how we've been treated in other countries. It doesn't really differ. It might differ in the delivery, but it's still there, because it's still color first. Like it's still the melanin first, and that is what's seen. No matter if you're in uniform or not. So, and especially like the differentiation, I guess, with being a melanated being born in the U.S. in the United States versus born in other countries, I mean, it's from what I've seen, it's still all the same.
Yeah.
But the opportunities differ in these different places. You have access to different resources in these other places. And overseas, I have to say that the food, as far as the markets, the fresh food, the raw food, the electric foods, they are in plenty supply. And they take care and pride in that. And here in America, you have places where you see where they take the more pride, and then you have places where you don't. And you got the expensive neighborhoods here, and you have the ghettos and such, the projects here in America. It's like that overseas as well, but in a lot of these countries, they just handle things differently. And even though they have their turmoil or whatever at certain points in time, they're not like deliberately seeming like they're trying to take down one race, like here in America. They do, but it's like a more it's a blindsided, like it's a side eye over there. They try to do it discreetly. Here it could be more blatant. Coming from out of Alabama, I'd have been chased. Certain places can't go when the sun go down. And it's there's a lot that can contribute both positively and negatively, just for what I've seen here in America and outside.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point that you make, because, and I'll say this: we just came from we just had here in this country, we just had July 4th.
Yeah.
Right. And so I saw some people making comments and memes about black people celebrating July 4th, and there was a certain group of people who were saying that it's a victim mindset, it's a victimhood type of thing, where when people refuse to celebrate July 4th being black. And one of the things was like, we're American, we're all American, and don't make the division. But one of the things I had to say, in response to that, is that when we start to rebel against the American culture and some of the things that we see here, it's not just because of slavery type of thing. It's not just because we're black and they're white. That's a very primitive idea. It's a very shallow idea. A lot of times when we start talking to people who actually, have an understanding of what's going on, we're talking about how a certain group of people have been treated across the global scale. Not just here in America are people of brown skin and dark skin treated unfairly, or treated as second class citizens. It is a cultural thing that has expanded into other countries. Across the world, dark skinned people are being mistreated. Across the world, they like to subjugate you to a lower class. And I have my idea about that too. It's a little bit ethereal, but I have my ideas about that. But what we see is there is a agenda, a global agenda, to relegate a certain group of people to a lesser class, and to deem them as uncivilized, or to deem them as not worthy, or things like that. And we do see that across the globe, and it's something that American culture has pushed. And American culture has pushed this idea of treating black people or treating brown-skinned people less than, or relegating them to a working class, or relegating them to a second-class citizen, or second-rate citizen, things like that. Time to your point is, they might do it in other ways, but it's done across the scale, and I feel as though it's something to do with our spiritual connection. There is an agenda to replace the idea of God in the natural with the idea of God in that unnatural, the idea of God has now, they have, let me say this correctly. They're trying to replace the idea of God because they're trying to implement themselves as God. We start to see people, sprinting towards this AI culture, towards cloning food.
You took it right out cloning me. You took it right out of me.
Yeah,
oh my God.
And they're trying to replace the natural with the unnatural.
Right. And doing that, coming in, say the LGBT, all of that.
Exactly. Now, I'm not wanting to jump into the LGBT conversation because it has nothing to do with me. It ain't even touching for me. It ain't got nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? That's not
impersonations of women. I'm a little touchy on that. I ain't gonna lie, I'm a little touchy on that.
Well, you can talk about it. It's family business. You know what I mean? Like what is. You know what I mean? You can't fool me with your ideas of what is. I know what is. I know where I came from. I came from my mother's womb. You know what I'm saying? And my father's loins. I understand those things.
Yes.
So I'm not confused about it. But the idea is to confuse the understanding of God so that you can replace the image of God. Yeah. So now but here's the thing though. Black people as a whole, we represent the natural. We represent, we feed off of nature, where other races are in combat with nature. They are in.
They can't take the sun.
They can't take the sun. But here's the thing, though, right? And we talked about this before on with other guests. It's like the European culture, even when you go out to the Slavic culture, they have always been in battle with nature because they were born and their origin comes from places that had harsh conditions. You know what I mean? They grew up in a space and area of lack. There was lack of food, lack of sunshine, lack of natural things, and they were always competing to live. They always had to be raised in a combative nature, where black and brown skinned people, we come from more tropical and more natural. We had the sunlight, we had fruit growing from the floor. We just throw a seed somewhere and a tree grew. But that over time developed into an inferiority complex. And that inferiority complex throughout cultures have made them our natural enemies. But not because we don't like them, it's because they've always been jealous of our ability to be in harmony with nature. Right. They've always been intimidated with our ability to be in harmony with nature. And so what you see is, when you start dealing with the ego, you start dealing with, people's lower vibration, they start to do things to, soothe their ego. They start to do things to help their insecurities, you know what I mean? So that's why I see the whole idea of making black and brown people feel inadequate, just because, and it's for no other reason other than, okay, well, we're going to monopolize information and resources. And through the monopolization of resources and information, you've created this idea around your superiority because you've been able to control and regulate, the trade of resources through foreign means, in terms of their fake money, like fiat money. You giving value to something that's fake while we have the value of something real. You know what I mean? So
and having it operate out of an entity that's just brought together by people with just a whole lot of money. Not any governmental ties. Now it has governmental ties, I guess, but it's not even based. Like the entire, like you said, it's a matrix, and and just even how we operate, 9 to 5 every day. 150 years ago, people weren't working on 9 to 5. Well, they probably were. They were probably working to sun up, sun down.
Yeah. I think work was different though.
And yes, the work was different.
They had an active, what I call it, an active participation in your life, in your lifestyle. Because instead of we have a job where we go 9 to 5, people used to work the land. They used to go ahead and gather fruit. They would hunt. They would plant. They would farm. They would build huts. But this was all out of functionality and necessity.
Exactly.
Instead of in terms of capitalizing off of the resources so that we can capitalize off of people's need for these things. We work for the needs. You know what I mean? When we needed food and we needed water, we worked for that. Instead of now, we work for someone so that we can have access to that. Yeah. And that middleman, the injection of the middleman has taken away from our harmonious living. And you see that all the time. You see it all the time. And you see the destruction of nature as well.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I want
to down in the deeper things like how they control the crop. And I read a couple articles about where in a lot of the cities across the U.S., they were starting to put out male trees or plant male trees because the female trees were bringing in too much fruit, and it was like they considered it a nuisance, and like for litter control, they started implementing that, spreading seeds of male trees. So I was like, in a lot of the U.S., you would be able to see, a peach tree here and there, just out. It's like you don't really see that unless somebody is really trying to farm.
Right.
But on a larger scale, going across the U.S. on these interstates and stuff like that, that interstate landscape is to corn and wheat and soybeans and all of that and farmland. So it's like, it's like it's bought up.
Yeah, but so I know because you drive truck as well, right? And I've spent a good amount of time on the road these last year and a half, 2 years. One thing that I noticed, and it was such a shock to me when I first noticed it, that how much of the United States is nothing. It's just open land. You drive for hours and hours and hours and you see nothing. And so we have this propaganda and we have this narrative that there's an overpopulation. But there's so much of the world that is not, there's so much of the country itself, not even getting to the world, but so much of the country itself is uninhabited, but it's open land for farming, for trees, for growth, for villages, for things to grow out of it. But we've created a society that is centered around industry. And so industry is going to capitalize off of the need for capital and labor. If we build an industrious industrious nation, we're going to have people investing in factories and investing in manufacturing instead of investing in farming and agriculture. Another point to that is, I don't know if you've heard that Bill Gates has bought up all of the farming land, farming land, and he's purchased it. And what he's doing...
Well, I mentioned that earlier, like, it's bought up.
Right. It's bought up. They're back, and they privatized it. You know what I mean? They privatized the land, which is another whole nother conversation.
How they put the seeds and how they trying to start injecting in all this, like... down the rabbit hole.
Right, exactly. Like, we could go on and on honestly, it's because they're at war with nature. You know what I mean? And that's something that we really have to start to think of for in our community. Now, a lot of us aren't going to get it because we're caught up in this rat race and all we see is this bag chase. But the essence of everything that's going on right now is you got to be able to see where you fit in this agenda. Because if you take a step back and you see this agenda and you see that people are at war with nature and they're at war with the natural, and you yourself represent nature and represent natural just because of your origin, then ultimately they're at war with you. And that's going to explain to you why you see so many programs and so much legislation that is detrimental to our communities. You know what I mean? But diving into the land, and there's so much land out there and things like that, it's part of the narrative. It's part of the narrative that people created so that they think that we're in a scarcity state or a lack state. You know? Oh yeah, definitely. This is family business. You know, we're gonna talk about it.
Like even in how they stage so much. Like staging things. A lot of these things that happen have been in the works. Say from the dawn of time.
Well, I'll tell you, they have and this is something that my father pointed out to me a while ago. They have a 100-year agenda. It was a 100-year agenda, and we're coming up on the 100th year. And the 100th year is 2030. And so they have an agenda for 2030. Which is one of the reasons why I feel like this platform is so important, because we get to talk about the things that need to be talked about. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So I don't want to take away from our guests, but yeah, tell me about what you've seen in regards to that.
No, not at all. You're not taking it all. I'm listening, you know, and hoping to piggyback and bounce back, you know. So, yeah. So it's like I said, down the rabbit hole. Like it's so many things because even though we are such a simple people, we are a simply complex peoples, and that is why it's that connection with nature and the intricacies of us down to the spiritual level and how we operate, you know, on the outside, so to say. And like you said, they are intimidated by it. So in every way they can, they're going to try to minimize that. And that comes in with the food and how they bought up the land and everything, because they do want to control the crop. They do want to implement things that are essentially going to calcify our pineal gland, you know, that's going to age us, it's going to oxidize us in so many ways. And that comes from inside to out, you know, having the fast foods, going into that side, fast foods, and just our habits and things that have catered to us because it feels good and not necessarily good for us. And, you know, giving us enough on the superficial and keeping us on that superficial and not being there and having us to not be able to look within ourselves and look deep within ourselves, to be able to see things deeper on the outside. It's like we're not looking deep enough at us to see deep enough outside.
Right.
So when we start seeing us outside, you know, we start seeing how people have this anger and rage, and how we at one point had anger and rage, and the thought process that we had, you know, to handle the situation, you know, in our reactions, and how we react to things implemented upon us, like the vaccine. I'm not vaccinated. I'm not getting stuff. So with that, it's like a lot of things were involuntary coming up. That's another thing, like traveling abroad, you know, and being in the military. I had to get a whole separate series of shots as a child. And it's just all that, taking all that as well in childhood, and how, you know, healthcare is handled or whatever. And taking that and seeing that it's gotta be something deeper for us, because a lot of this stuff out here is not for us.
Right.
And
it's just not for us.
It's not.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, is that we have been taught by European culture. We've been taught by our oppressor. So when you're from a young age, you're consumed by it. You're consumed by their social norms. You're consumed by their do's and their don'ts, their rights and their wrongs. But we've never had the ability to create or even define ourselves. You know what I mean? And once you start to look and study and look deeper, you start to see our connection to the natural. You start to see our connection to the spiritual, outside of Western culture. But we've been so consumed with Western culture that we don't know what the difference of Western culture to any other culture is, other than what we've seen the Western culture describe it as. When we start looking at your Eastern culture, we only see it through the eyes of Western culture. Right. So we don't know what it is, and we see it as so foreign, or something that might be a trend, or something like, oh, okay, yoga. Taboo. Yeah. Like, so even going into yoga practices, deep breathing meditation, we see these things are trendy, and we see these things like, it's a vegan diet, it's a yoga practice. No, these are things that are spiritually essential to who you are.
Eat to live, like in every aspect, like not just in the food that you put in your body, but what you allow yourself to listen to, what you allow yourself to say, what you allow yourself to hear and see and do. Yes. And yes, that comes into all that has to be, in harmony.
Right.
And if we see it outside that is not in harmony, you still have to have that sense of harmony and self to be able to operate in outside. And that's,
it's key, it's big. I want to touch on one thing that you said. It kind of stood out. What we say, how we use language, and I was making a point to a I forgot who I was talking to, but a good friend of mine. Man, who was I talking to when I said this? We was going in deep, but what I was saying was our language in the United States is so different from all other languages. English itself is a bastardized language. So when we start listening to Semitic languages, Aramaic languages, when we start listening to foreign languages in whole, it's a much more guttural sound.
Yep.
We start to speak from the back of our throat. Because, and I'm a spoken word artist, you know what I'm saying? And
yes, you are.
No doubt.
You surely are.
I appreciate that.
Expressing, doing your thing.
No doubt, no doubt. I'm gonna be back on the stage pretty soon. I'll be back on it. It's a calling, you know what I'm saying? I can never, put it down. But, when we say that there's power in the spoken word, and life lives on our tongue, life and death lives in our tongue. So when we start speaking our natural language, and you start going over to foreign countries and you hear their language, it's much more guttural. It comes from a different part of your throat, which represents a chakra, as opposed to the English language, which is spoken on the tip of our tongues. It's a spellbounding language, and people don't know
it's the vibration that it gives off. It's the frequency that it gives off.
Exactly.
The sound wave is how it reverberates, like what's said, how it vibrates into you. It's a whole thing.
You see,
and it's even down to the music made here in America. It's the frequency, it's that vibration, as to where it's not in harmony. I just interrupted you.
No. It's all good. It's all good. As long as it's family business, we all good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because honestly, I'll say this, that the Most High, the Spirit, when it needs something to be said, it's going to be said. Whether it's coming from one vessel or another, this is that age, this is that time. You know what I mean? And so, to have this conversation is important, just because whoever hears it is going to have a further understanding of what it is we're actually doing here. You know what I mean? There you're going to represent, you're either going to be a representation of light or dark. How are you going to live your life? When we start to mold ourselves to European culture, which goes back to that whole, celebrating July 4th. It's not about whether you want to be an American or not. You better know what being an American means and what being in America represents.
And reading the history here, reading the history outside, and just taking it upon yourself to think for yourself.
Right.
And want to know more, be able to know more, learn more, so that you're able to do more. And in the fight for whatever it is.
Right. But a lot of times we see material wealth, and we want to latch ourselves to material wealth because we don't want to attach ourselves to lack. We don't want to be in that category. So we start to agree with things, and we start to side with things that may represent what you think is a strong branch. So you want to hang on that strong branch. Well, I want to be a part of this American dream. And so we start to forget about the things that are really important in life. And when we start to say, oh, you want to be an American, and I'm American, you're proud to be American, like I said, you got to know what American means, what that means, what it has meant all throughout time, where it came from. You know what I mean? There is a breadcrumb, there is a trail of American culture before America became America. Right. And it is stained with the blood of your ancestors. I don't care whether you're talking about slavery, because we could go beyond slavery. We can go beyond that. We could go to the Crusades. We could go through when Rome invaded Africa. You can go back to all of these things. It's not just about Black America and slavery and things like that. There's an essence of who we are, and there are people who have tried with diligence to destroy our identity. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we're not talking about our identity as it's written down on paper. We're talking about our identity as it is referred to and in reference to the Most High and into the natural world. Who are we? Where did we come from? Why do we have such a connection to the natural world, and why are people trying to destroy that connection to the natural world? And so then we start to look at, the things like what we eat. Are we eating natural foods? Not only are we eating natural food, but do you have access to natural foods?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Why
don't we have access, and how do we get access?
Right. Now, and here's the thing: like, people always want to point a finger, like, oh, well, black people gonna eat Popeyes, and black people gonna. You've never been taught anything outside of commercial living, so I wouldn't expect anything else. What I would expect is for the people who know better to teach others to do better, and then for the ones who don't know better to learn better, and not to lean on the side of ignorance. Oh, well, that doesn't make it. Now, I don't know that. No, you don't know it because you weren't taught it. But let me teach you something different. You know what I mean? And that's where it comes from. Are you going to promote this culture who is trying to dumb you down and numb your senses? Are you going to keep promoting this culture? Are you going to keep celebrating their holidays? Are you going to keep, going to, their celebrations and events and things like that? Are you going to keep on perpetuating their influence over you? Or, you know what? You don't have to know what's right. Let's just start off with what's wrong. Let's just start off with, you should understand that murder is wrong. You should understand that raping, assassination, kidnapping, genocide, these things are wrong. So let's just not be in the wrong. I may not know what right is just yet, but let's remove ourselves with what we know intuitively is wrong. You know what I mean? And that's where that break from American culture has to start at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, indeed. So to say American, like, it's not being able to define what that is, but having it be a melting pot now, but and finding self who it is as a community. And I think that one of the places where we got to see it first is family, and what it is as far as in this generation, especially our age, and what it is to. Because we're at the age or past, some people say we passed the age of, bringing in children, that they're going to be the generation while we're working, they're going to reap what we're working for as well, as we reap, in this lifetime as well. So it's having sight now, being able to strengthen the foresight and see things as they happen, and be able to look in, for forward sight. Like you said, vision. I don't know why the words are leaving me. But yes, just being able to take that, have that flower, whatever it is, flower in a business, flower in the family, and starting, if that be the choice for you. But making sure that you have as to where you don't have to go to what is American culture. You don't have to go to what's the Popeyes. You don't have to go to even the Walmarts, the Sprouts, and all that. You got your market in your backyard, and have it be for crop for yourself and crop for your residuals. And doing that, and with the land itself. Here in other parts of the U.S., other countries, it starts to. It can be vast, but where it starts is wherever you decide to have your family and what you want to start your foundation on. That is, what's gonna have to be taken into account is, how you can do this healthily, because your health is going to give you that longevity, and that comes into how you eat, what you put into your body, as far as foods. And everything, good vegetables, things that are, going to give you nutrient and allow you to cleanse, and be at the site of looking at ages, really just a number, ages in your health, because there's 66-year-olds that can outrun 20-year-olds.
Right.
So it's that state of mind, it's that psychological what you're going to make up in your mind to do, and that goes into how you show up in giving yourself the love and doing the breath work and doing the yoga and looking within self and looking in mind and heart and emotions and making sure that your outside is in harmony with mind and emotions, and being able to give that fruit, that same fruit that you take into your body. That fruit could be in a word, and that's what the spoken word is. It's being fruitful in that, and not just, you're not just a spoken word artist on stage. You spoken word artist. That's who you are. So that's what you and me as well, are in our everyday life, because it's already said in this language, in choosing our words. That's what we choose it to do, to be guidance for ourselves, to be unhealthy in all levels, and be guidance, and be testimony for other people. And that starting in family, and how that's the foundation as to where all that, I feel like would be our solution to combat systemic racism, in every aspect of our lives. If we're going to be here in this land, it's a sense of reclamation, getting our house in order, and our house is in order, and just making sure that they're functioning sufficiently, self-sufficiently in its own, with its own. I be saying, me personally, I want to go, when I do have children, they're going to be at home, water birth. I used to say I wanted to have Eric Badu be my doula, but this was like, I was maybe 14, 15 when I first started that, and I'm just like...
It's not far-fetched. It's not far-fetched. I mean, she lives right here in Atlanta, don't she? I believe she does, yeah. She came by Tassili's Raw Vegan Restaurant.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, she always, I had someone that knew her in high school. When I was in high school, they told me about her, and it's like, they said that she's always been this eclectic, so to say, different being. But it's just like, that's always been Erica, the way the lady explained her, described her. But yeah, just having that natural part. I don't know about that now. Say I'm getting away from, following just.
I mean, I'm following you though. I feel like with the
that
training.
That was just a side note, but
it starts with family.
Yes. And having that in a natural order, and that's gonna give you that drive to do what you need to do outside, and working on yourself, and working on, health and wealth. Right. And when we see things out here, like you said, what's right and what's wrong. If we in any type of situations where we see that, we always have to be looking for a resolution, no matter what we see outside. And in everywhere we are, because in every moment, we have this moment, we might not have the next. So at every moment, the thought, and that's how you change your thought pattern, and changing, evolving your thought pattern, and evolving your heart pattern, and evolving your outside habits to take in the things that are healthy for you, to be able to give a helping hand, to a complete stranger, instead of seeing and trying to put it on live, and using social media, whatever, clout chasing. It has to be in the heart to want to have something for longevity. Now, a lot of people, well, I'm not gonna say a lot of people, but there are people who, I feel like the disconnect, it's almost too far gone. And
I'm a firm believer in that. You're not gonna get everybody. But I do want to touch on kind of what you were when you started talking about family, and I bring that up because when we start, especially nowadays, we see a lot of information, a lot of clips and memes about relationships, and I feel like we've been caught in this loop of superficial relationships, you know what I mean, what love is and things like that. But when you start talking about building relationships, it's not about the romanticized idea of love. And I had a brother on, my man Sincere, and we started talking about what the purpose of love is. And the purpose, we started talking about purpose and the purpose of love, obviously, but when we start talking about purpose, there is an intentional aspect of love. And the intentional aspect is, what are we going to produce from this love? And a lot of people are building relationships based off of superficial criteria without diving into the purpose of coming together, the purpose of love, and which I believe it leads to what we see right now in terms of the dating pool and marriages breaking up or the divorce rate and things like that. But it's because we lack the purpose behind, the intentional force behind our love and our relationships. And when you start talking about living in harmony, living in order, families has to be built off of a structure that represents our intention and our purpose. You know what I mean? And in that intention and our purpose, we have to represent something in this world. And if we're not representing divine order, natural order, those two things, what are we representing? And so it has come to a point where our lack of knowledge automatically defaults you to living in this lack of purpose and chasing pleasure. So it's like we don't have an idea of what the purpose or the intention would be, and so because of that, by default, we are living in this. That's profound right there.
The purpose and intention in it is getting to me, because out of all that I've said thus far, that's exactly what it boils down to, purpose and intention. Because that once people all over the world are searching for what their purpose is. We're all searching for what our purpose is. Unless you just go day to day, just whatever,
right. Oblivious.
Exactly, like it comes down to, like you said, purpose and intention. So I just want to say that is profound, because purpose, foundation, intention, intention is going to make sure that it comes out good, and you just got to hope that it's going to come back good. And if it don't, you just got to play that hand. And
to touch on that, right? And I'm gonna try to have this idea I want to express. Shout out to my brothers Knowledge, Kenwado, Obasi, Queen Mother's Hope, Queen Goddess Hope, excuse me. They have a podcast, and they also have a platform on Instagram that they do every Wednesday. So definitely check that out. But one of the ideas that we were discussing is understanding what the devil looks like. Understanding because we created this dichotomy between God and the devil. And because we live in this Western culture, our understanding of God and the devil has been created by a European religion and Western culture. But to understand what God is and understand what the devil is, when we start talking about the devil, the lack of purpose, i.e. confusion and uncertainty represents the devil. The thing about Western culture is we are always surrounded and bombarded with so many different stimuli. We're bombarded with the sports, with the music, with the entertainment, with the propaganda. We got the drama. We got the soap operas. We got all of these things that are directing our attention nonstop. And because of that, because they've sped up all of this what we call life, we have forgotten we haven't been able to identify what purpose is. So when you start to talk to people about what's your purpose in life, they automatically address it to either a job or an activity or my purpose here is to be an artist. My purpose here is to be, that's not purpose. You know what I mean? That's activity. You know what I mean? And you may express your purpose through your art. You may express your purpose through certain things, but we have been hit with all of these different, like I said, these stimuluses where we forget what purpose actually is. Now, when we start talking about purpose, we have to first understand our identity. Our identity is not, expressed through cultural barriers. It's not expressed through imaginary boundaries created by land and government, built by man and government. Our identity is always in a reflection of natural life, what life is, because we are a part of life. We are part of creation. So we are here to express something. And if we are here to express anything, our purpose would have to be to express divine order. Divine order started before us, which is the reason why we are here. You know what I mean? When we start talking about the Father, the Son, and the child, that was the original Trinity.
Mother, Son, the child.
So,
Mother, Father, child.
So we start to express
Father,
that.
Mother, child.
No doubt, no doubt. When we start to express that, you know what I mean? That is going to be your identity as it relates to life. Now, when you do that, when you move throughout this world, you have to be an expression of that. And the expression of that is to express life, to represent life, to represent the natural order of life.
Yes.
And again, for people that don't know, there's a war going on outside. I know I like that. It's a spiritual warfare, but it is the natural order versus the unnatural order. So your purpose becomes in life to represent the natural order of life. Now, when you have these different stimuluses that always hit you and sway your idea one way or another, that is the devil trying to convince you that you are out, that you do not fit in a natural order, trying to convince you that, oh, you can do whatever you want, you can do whatever there is out there under the sun to do. But if it doesn't fall in alignment with divine order, if it doesn't fall in alignment with natural order, it is the representation of chaos and confusion. And that is what the devil is. So when we start talking about, people say, oh, well, the white man's the devil. It's not, that's too superficial of a thought, too shallow of a thought. It's not about the white man being the devil. It's about what this culture represents. And it does not represent the natural order or harmony of life. And that's who we are. We are a representation of the natural order and harmony of life. And so that is the war that we are currently finding ourselves in.
Yeah, absolutely. You put that all in a nice nutshell. And yeah, cause that's the fruit. Like, and it's almost like living in death. A lot of things that are evil are on the path to what is a death of some sort. Killing people, I feel like that's a spiritual death. Like, if you kill somebody, and it's not like if you weren't, if I had to fend for my life, I'm gonna fend for my life. You get what I'm saying? But if you are intentionally, if you have that psyche as to where you just want to go out and deliberately, do something to somebody, harm them and take them from being living, then over something material, then that psyche is just
it's representation. Yeah,
that's a representation of the disconnect.
Yes.
So it just.
Nah, I get what you're saying. So to say what you, and I get the feel. You know what I mean? Like, I understand. Number one, I say this: we have the ability to represent a lower vibration and a higher vibration. A lot of times when we feel, when our egos is bruised, right? When the egos is bruised, we start to operate out of our lower vibration. And you start to have people who want to do things maliciously to you or with malintent. They want to hurt you. They're operating out of something. Right. And that something is a representation of something bigger. You know what I mean? And so when you have people that want to hurt you and do things bad to you, and initially they're operating out of lower vibration, which represents the what I would call the darkness, the darkness of instead of representing the light. And
speak my mind.
I'm reading it. I'm putting it out on paper. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what it does. What we're doing right now in this culture is we're representing a low vibration. But we start it's low vibrational, high vibrational, and everything becomes so trendy, and it's almost a hindrance. But one thing, we sure, especially here on Philly Business, we're gonna get down to. We're gonna talk about the truth of it. So it's not just about low vibrational, high vibrational. Oh, I'm high vibrational, walking on water. Okay, yeah, I'm holier than thou. No, it's about understanding where that energy comes from and what it represents in the world. Because you have to now become a representation of the light. It's not to be living in your kumbaya, living in your, No, you have to be intentional about what you're putting out in the world and representing in the world. And until we can identify, definitely, and until we can identify what our actions are representing and being able to call people out on what their actions are representing, the war will continue to go on. Because that's what happens when we start to people get butthurt. People get all hurt in the ego and they want to, do petty things. And, being petty is now even a cool thing. Like, hey, it don't matter if you're petty. Go ahead and be petty. But you don't understand what you're doing when you're acting petty. Right. When you're acting petty, you're acting immaturely. You're acting from a low vibrational state. And every single time you start to act from that low vibrational state, you're feeding into something. You're giving power to something that is not of the highest vibration. Yeah. And so you can live in, I see it all the time. I don't know if people kind of get where I'm coming from when I say this, but we are living in a low vibrational frequency. America has created a low vibrational frequency. It's like a cloud. It's like a thick, like musk of low vibrational frequency.
From the music to the fast food
to the celebrations.
Like the July 4th.
To like a July 4th. Let's shoot the fireworks and keep the dead meat on the and keep the beef and let's all get drunk and no, what you're doing is perpetuating a low vibrational frequency.
Exactly.
And as you do that, you're feeding into something. Now, if you not, energy is never created nor destroyed. It's only transferred.
Yes, sir.
So if you're not giving energy to one thing, you're giving it to another thing.
Yep.
A good brother of mine said, yo, every single time you make a choice, whether you make a choice or don't make a choice, you made a choice. You know what I mean? So every single time you feed into these low vibrational activities, you're defending something. You're giving power to something that is in conflict with something else. So either you're gonna be of the light or you're gonna be of the dark. But the thing is, and here's the thing, we've never been presented with that idea to be able to actually, really understand it. We've never been presented with the idea long enough or thoroughly enough to really know what that actually means. Like, okay, well, that with the low vibration free, I don't know. You know what? I'm gonna go get this bag because my rent due. Well, who made you have to pay rent? Who made you have to go get this job? Who made you have to go to the same people who want you to operate out of a low frequency?
Yep.
They created the circumstance for you to be a prisoner of your own vibrational force.
Yep.
So when we start to talk about resisting American culture, that's what we're talking about. It's not about slavery. It's not about black versus white. Those are superficial ideas. Those are primitive ideas of a docile mind. The enlightened understanding comes from you are feeding into a force that is bigger than you. And that force that you're feeding into has a conflicting force to it. So even if you're feeding into the darkness, then you're letting that darkness overcome the light. And if you're feeding into the light, you're allowing the light to overcome the dark. And that is what we battle against. And that's in your scripture. We battle not against, man in the physical. We battle against the entities of light and dark. And I'm not one to quote the Bible, but it's out there. Go ahead and check it out.
And that's the thing, because throughout the ages, on that tip of religion, because that's been another aspect of how, I feel like it's been a hindrance on us as far as religion, because we can only think inside these principles and this, this realm and thinking that, we are disconnected from, that eternal energy. We are in this now also what has always been. So you said we are made of the same thing that's been here. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, it's only transferred. So everything in us, down to the atoms and molecules of us, has been here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just shifted into a different form.
Right.
We come in at a different time. The spiritual essence of here, that connection and that essential, we are an instrument of the divine order orchestra. Like we are an instrument. A little bit of that light, is flowing through us, and that is keeping that connect open so that light can flow through us.
Right.
So it can, continue to stay within us at all times and be able to give, not pouring from an empty cup. So that's why the things that hinder us, and like religion, us being able to think for ourselves, for one, to be able to look at information, and if questions be had, to go and look at some more information, and continue to be able to ask questions and ask the right questions, and take in the knowledge. But religion, has gotten to the principles and glory of things. Baptist churches across the South, Pastor got to go get him, Christ 300,
right.
all of that, and it's like, is it vain? It's like you're preaching the word, but it's people that ain't got nothing on the street that's preaching word. So it's people in the everyday preaching a word. You get what I'm saying? That word is to hopefully choose the light, and recognize that there is dark, but disconnect that and connect to the light. And that's in all senses. That's that knowledge. And if us, using that, even with speaking English, having that vibration for our words to be life, for it to be light, and not be, the dark and essentially a death. Because if you're not using, your mind, if you're not using your heart, it essentially starts to die. It's a muscle just like anything. The mind is a muscle. Heart is a muscle. It's like our body is a muscle. If you're not using that, if you're not constantly, really going through tests and obstacles and trials, and being and having to be disciplined in things, and coming into silence and distancing yourself, and not going to this party, and not being around, at these functions, and being able to sit with yourself, and being able to sit with yourself in silence, and really sort through your mind, so that you can act, accordingly with harmony with the Most High, and doing that. Here in the Black community, like we see a lot, like in the music, what we hear, just we know the music that's out there. The young lady from St. Louis or whatever, putting that out and having a hype, that's another form of influencing something that is dark. And because it's degrading, yes, it's snazzy, it's clever, it's supposedly part of the culture, but it's like, even if we looked in Africa or back in the pre-slavery America, at the dress, there was a point in time, where, and this is kind of off on a tangent, but we were naked, but it was no over sexualization of things.
Right.
It's like the over sexualization when it comes to how our minds think. It becomes that sits in the lower vibration because. And it shows itself in other ways in being carnal, like being angry and, wanting revenge and vengeful and, not knowing how to take that anger or, that displaced anger and focus it in this direction of light, using it in a positive outlet for yourself. And that's where, a lot of things get pent up, and you become even more disconnected. Plus, you're eating the bad foods, and plus, you're getting the bad energy from other people, and dealing with the world itself. Being us here in America, the battle is on every level. There is a battle on every level, but we have to look at this war and understand that the resolution to the war is us, and it's us solidifying a solid unit to be able to protect our own and have our own sustained for longevity. So that's our family.
That's our
family business.
Family business. Yo, you know what? We usually go about an hour, so I think we could wrap this one up. But I definitely appreciate you for coming through.
Absolutely.
And I know there were certain parts that I was going off and talking about things, but I want to honestly say your energy allowed me to express certain things that I expressed today.
It's like I'm vague in what I say, and it's like you hit it, you come back, put it.
But because I knew where you was coming from, right? And I always like to use the analogy where it's like when you have two matches, two fires, and then you put them together, it's a bigger flame. Yeah. And so today, I think that was definitely a representation of that. And I'm the speaker, you know what I mean? I use my words and things like that. So my ability to feel you and then express it, you know what I mean? I definitely believe that was all in divine order, all in divine purpose. So definitely want to thank you for coming through.
Thank you so much for having me.
No
Thank
doubt.
you so much for allowing me to ramble and.
Now we're gonna chop this up.
Thoughts,
the sound bites on this episode alone, I might just play them out for a whole month.
Oh man, look man.
Because the way the episodes are kind of unfolding right now, I drop one a week, and so I'm on 4, but I have a back list of like 4 episodes. So this one might not air for like until July. But some of the stuff we talked about, it just gotta get out there. So I'm gonna figure it out. You know what I mean?
It's here, like and you said, it's the energy. It's the one to ask the questions. You know, with that purpose and intention, finding purpose and intention. You know, and doing just what we need to do to keep ourselves healthy. And if we do choose to have those families, keep the families healthy, protected. You know, and always trying to learn outside of what's been given us, because everything that's given to you is not meant for good. And we have to continue to find and be on that path to find what's good, to have what's good, to keep what's good, you know, and good for us, and be able to give back the good. And and represent that. So this right here, doing this, I am gratuitous to you, you know, for doing this as long as you have been doing it, and continuing to be you, and finding the other avenues to talk and do this business. I remember you mentioning that, you know, your projects on the side of wanting to, you know, be involved with the youth and having them, you know, that displaced anger, whatever they may have, and focus it in a good, you know, a good direction, and just doing that. So I'm thankful for you, you know, for having this platform and still continuing to, you know, do work in the community. You know, me and you with the stage play and everything, like there was a different atmosphere, you know, still, you know, the same energies, but it is, you know, just you still putting in the work, like the groundwork, planting the seeds, you know, solidifying them roots. So yeah, we plant trees, and live for the life, breathe that goodness, you know, and have that goodness. So yeah,
we're definitely
planting
seeds. You know what I mean? Definitely planting seeds. So again, Tra-Saundria, I want to thank you for coming on the platform. This is your host, Poetics. We signing out. Family business, our wealth, our health, our business. Family business.
Peace.
Peace, family.